Trump was confident on that rally stage. He had decided to target Jasmine Crockett in front of a crowd of 10,000 people. "These radical prosecutors don't respect the will of the people," he began. The crowd was cheering, the media was recording, and Trump thought this would be an easy political victory. But he didn't know that Crockett would go on Twitter that night and completely destroy his entire narrative with just 7 tweets. The Pennsylvania Convention Center was packed beyond capacity on that humid Saturday evening in August. The Trump rally had drawn his most fervent supporters from across the tri-state area, and the energy was electric with the kind of anticipation that only came with a former president who thrived on controversy. Donald Trump stood at the podium, his red tie perfectly knotted, his signature gestures already warming up as he scanned the sea of red MAGA hats before him. The teleprompter displayed his prepared remarks, but everyone knew Trump was at his most dangerous when he went off script. And tonight, he was feeling particularly combative. "We're being attacked by radical prosecutors who hate America," Trump declared, his voice carrying that familiar mix of grievance and defiance that had defined his political career. "These people, and I'm talking about prosecutors like Jasmine Crockett down in Texas, they don't respect the will of the people." The mention of Crockett's name drew immediate boos from the crowd. Most of them had never heard of her before Trump's social media posts over the past week, but that didn't matter. If Trump said she was the enemy, she was the enemy. "This woman," Trump continued, his voice rising, "this so-called prosecutor, has spent her career trying to tear down everything we've built. She wants to defund the police. She wants to let criminals run wild. And she wants to prosecute patriots who love this country." The crowd roared its approval. Someone shouted, "Lock her up!" And the chant began to spread through the arena. But 2,500 miles away in Dallas, Texas, Jasmine Crockett was watching the live stream on her laptop, and she wasn't intimidated. She was taking notes. Crockett sat in her home office, still wearing the navy blazer from the community meeting she'd attended earlier that evening. Her congressional pin gleamed under the desk lamp as she methodically documented every false claim, every distortion, every outright lie that Trump was telling about her record. As a former prosecutor, she had learned long ago that the best response to an attack wasn't immediate retaliation. It was methodical preparation. And Trump had just given her all the ammunition she needed. Back in Pennsylvania, Trump was hitting his stride. "Jasmine Crockett thinks she's above the law," he declared, his voice dripping with contempt. "She thinks because she has a fancy title and went to some liberal law school, she can ignore the Constitution and prosecute innocent Americans for political reasons." The irony wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. Trump, who was facing multiple criminal indictments, was attacking a prosecutor for politicizing the justice system. "These prosecutors," Trump continued, his gestures becoming more animated, "they're not interested in justice. They're interested in power. They want to silence anyone who disagrees with their radical agenda." The crowd ate it up. Signs waved in the air reading, "Prosecute the prosecutors," and "Justice for patriots." The energy was reaching a fever pitch, but Trump wasn't finished with Crockett. "This woman has never prosecuted a real criminal in her life," he claimed, his voice heavy with disdain. "She's too busy going after conservatives, too busy playing politics, too busy being woke to actually fight crime." That particular lie would prove to be Trump's biggest mistake of the evening. As Trump continued his tirade, Crockett's phone began buzzing with messages from colleagues, friends, and family members who were watching the rally. "He's going after you hard," texted her chief of staff. "This is insane," wrote her law school roommate. "Stay strong," came from her mother. But Crockett wasn't worried. If anything, she was energized. Trump had just made a series of factual claims about her record that were not only false, but easily disprovable. And unlike Trump, she had receipts. As the rally wound down and Trump left the stage to thunderous applause, Crockett opened her Twitter account and began to type. The first tweet went live at 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time. "I see I was the featured entertainment at tonight's rally. Since Mr. Trump seems confused about my record, let me help clarify a few things." Thread. Within minutes, the tweet had hundreds of retweets and thousands of likes. Word was spreading quickly that Crockett was about to respond. The second tweet followed immediately. 2. Mr. Trump claimed I've never prosecuted a real criminal. My record: 47 felony convictions including 12 violent crimes, 8 sexual assault cases, and 15 drug trafficking operations, all publicly documented, all real criminals. Next. The response was immediate and electric. Social media erupted as people began sharing Crockett's actual prosecution record. Legal experts who had worked with her began chiming in with their own testimonials. But Crockett was just getting started. Tweet 3 came 2 minutes later. 3. He said I want to defund the police. Reality check. I've authored legislation increasing funding for police training, mental health resources, and community policing. I've worked with law enforcement on reform because I believe in making policing better, not eliminating it. This tweet struck a particular nerve because it highlighted Trump's tendency to paint all police reform as defunding. Crockett's nuanced approach, working with law enforcement rather than against it, made Trump's characterization look crude and simplistic. Tweet 4 went even further. 4. Let criminals run wild. I've prosecuted more cases in 5 years than most DAs see in a decade. I've put dangerous people behind bars while ensuring innocent people don't get railroaded. It's called actual justice, not political theater. The contrast was becoming clear. While Trump dealt in broad generalizations and political slogans, Crockett was providing specific facts and real numbers. Tweet 5 was where she started to turn the tables. 5. Mr. Trump mentioned ignoring the Constitution. Interesting choice of words from someone who tried to overturn a free and fair election, asked officials to find votes, and encouraged supporters to march on the Capitol. But sure, let's talk about constitutional violations. The retweets were pouring in now. Crockett's response was trending nationally. News outlets were picking up the thread and writing stories in real time. But Crockett saved her most devastating point for tweet 6. 6. He called me a radical prosecutor for doing my job. But here's what's actually radical: claiming elections are stolen without evidence, trying to pressure state officials to change vote counts, and using the presidency to attack prosecutors who hold people accountable. The tweet was a masterclass in political jujitsu, taking Trump's attack and redirecting it back at him with surgical precision. The final tweet in the thread was simple but powerful. 7. I took an oath to uphold the law and protect the Constitution. I've never wavered from that oath, regardless of who it makes uncomfortable. If that makes me radical, I'll wear that badge with pride. Some things are more important than politics, like justice. The thread exploded across social media. Within hours it had been shared by celebrities, politicians, legal experts, and millions of ordinary Americans who were impressed by Crockett's calm, fact-based response to Trump's bombastic attacks. But the real impact wasn't just in the metrics, it was in the narrative shift that followed. News coverage the next morning focused not on Trump's rally attacks, but on Crockett's methodical dismantling of his claims. CNN's morning show brought on former prosecutors who praised her record. MSNBC featured a segment on how to respond to political attacks with facts. Even some conservative commentators had to acknowledge the effectiveness of her response. I disagree with Crockett's politics, wrote one prominent conservative columnist, but her Twitter thread was a clinic in how to defend yourself with facts rather than rhetoric. Trump walked into a buzzsaw of his own making. The rally that was supposed to damage Crockett had instead elevated her national profile and demonstrated something important about political communication in the social media age. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't the loudest one, it's the most accurate one. Trump, meanwhile, was furious. His aides reported that he spent the next morning rage tweeting about fake news and corrupt prosecutors. But the damage was done. His attacks on Crockett had backfired spectacularly, making her look more credible and him look more desperate. But the story didn't end with the Twitter thread. The real impact played out over the following weeks. Crockett's response had demonstrated something that political strategists had been saying for years, but rarely proved. In an age of information, facts could still triumph over fiction if they were presented skillfully enough. Law schools began using her Twitter thread as a case study in crisis communication. Political consultants analyzed her strategy for responding to high-profile attacks. Social media experts broke down how she had managed to control the narrative despite being outnumbered by Trump's massive following. More importantly, Crockett's response had shown other politicians, particularly women and people of color who were frequent targets of Trump's attacks, that there was a way to fight back that didn't require sinking to his level. 3 weeks after the rally, Crockett received an unexpected phone call from a Republican prosecutor in Pennsylvania. "Representative Crockett," the voice said, "I wanted to thank you for that Twitter thread. I'm a Republican, and I voted for Trump. But what you did that night, defending the profession, standing up for real prosecution work, that was bigger than politics." The prosecutor continued, "I've been dealing with politicians who think they can attack prosecutors without consequences. Your response showed that we don't have to take it quietly." It was exactly the kind of response Crockett had hoped for when she started typing that Saturday night. The thread hadn't just been about defending herself. It had been about defending the principle that prosecutors should be judged on their records, not their politics. 6 months later, at a legal conference in Chicago, a young prosecutor approached Crockett during a break. "Representative Crockett," the woman said, "I wanted to thank you for that response to Trump's rally. I'm a new prosecutor, and I was getting attacked by local politicians who didn't like some of my cases. I was thinking about backing down, but then I remembered your Twitter thread. I decided to stand up for my record instead." She smiled. It worked. When you respond with facts instead of emotions, it's harder for people to dismiss you. That, Crockett realized, had been the real victory. Not the social media metrics or the news coverage, but the example she had set for other prosecutors and public servants who were facing political pressure. The rally attack that was supposed to intimidate her had instead inspired others to stand up for themselves. But perhaps the most telling indicator of the thread's impact came 8 months later, when Trump was asked about Crockett during a different interview. "Jasmine Crockett," he said, his tone noticeably more measured than it had been at the rally. "Look, she's a prosecutor. She does her job. I don't agree with her politics, but she's not the worst." It was as close to a concession as anyone had ever heard from Trump. The man who had called her a radical prosecutor who had never prosecuted a real criminal was now grudgingly acknowledging her competence. The transformation was a testament to the power of responding to attacks not with counterattacks, but with verifiable facts presented in a clear, compelling way. Crockett's 7 tweets had done more than defend her reputation. They had demonstrated a different way of engaging in political combat. Instead of trying to outshout Trump or match his level of personal attacks, she had simply told the truth about her record and let the facts speak for themselves. It was a strategy that required confidence, preparation, and skill, qualities that Trump had underestimated when he decided to make her a target. But most importantly, it was a strategy that worked. The rally that was supposed to damage Jasmine Crockett had instead made her a national figure and provided a blueprint for how other public servants could defend themselves against political attacks. And all it took was 7 tweets and the courage to let the truth speak for itself. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you that facts are more powerful than fiction and truth is stronger than theater, make sure to subscribe for more stories of people who prove that the best response to political attacks isn't always the loudest one. Sometimes it's simply the most accurate one. Because in an age of information, the most powerful weapon isn't a bigger platform or a louder voice. Sometimes it's just having the receipts to back up your claims.